Good evening, everyone, and I hope you have enjoyed the movie so far. Now, you have an opportunity to have a conversation with us after having watched what is a very, very interesting movie and has some very interesting themes, as well as setting us back, way back into 1969 and to about 1982, thereabouts, into that atmosphere. So I'm sure alongside with the Imagine Film Festival that we're all looking at the moment, especially with the special reflection on the Small Axis film series by Steve McQueen, we're going to be looking at the different elements to that. We're going to talk about race, we're going to talk about life, we're going to talk about music, we're going to talk about all the things that are familiar to us, and maybe for some of us, it'll remind us of the past that we know so well. So tonight in studio with me, I have a couple of guests and friends who share the same love for movies, who have different ways that they relate to the movie you've just watched. And I hope as we have the conversation tonight, you take part with us and the list will just go on and we have an information exchange. So my first guest I'd like to introduce, I would start with Johanna. Johanna is with the Strand Arts Cinema. Hi, Johanna.
Hello.
Nice to have you with us this evening. Now, I know you're the project manager at Strand Arts Cinema, so there's a lot of work that is associated with, I think, the cinema itself and films. So how are you feeling about this movie tonight?
It's great to just be able to have his films so accessible, because if you kind of know a lot of his back catalogue, there it isn't as much in the public eye. Originally, Steve McQueen would have been kind of known as an artist and as a moving image artist, and then he kind of had a couple of niche films, and obviously he did Hunger, which was so great because that's obviously connected to Belfast. But this is the first time where it's kind of like it's on the BBC, and then obviously you can watch it on iPlayer, and it seems to be up for about a year. So it's a really great time for people to have access to that film. Whereas what I find is, with some of these films that are kind of on particular topics or cover different diversity, you find then they're quite hard to find and get a hold of, or you see a screening in a like an art house space and then you can't find it again. So I think it's just really nice to kind of see how mainstream this one has become.
Well, it's good because we're going to have quite an interesting conversation, and we hope that we will get the audience to go on this journey with us, because I think there's a lot of things we like to talk about. Diversity is key in this very moment. We appreciate that there was Black Lives Matter throughout the course of last year, which is an ongoing theme. And before we know it, we will be approaching the anniversary of George Floyd's death. And I think we need to talk about the things that are so important to us as individuals, as the community, and as we develop and make changes, not only to narratives, but also how we look at life in general. So I think everyone is already on board with us. I mean, tonight I've been so keen to talk about my guests, I didn't even talk about myself. I'm Lori Gatsi-Barnett, and I'm delighted to continue to have this conversation. As you can see, the focus is about the guests and what we're discussing this evening. So the next guest I want to have on to join us, I mean, he's a creative person, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen him online. Social media has done him a lot of justice. He is, I think, on a lot of award lists, and I think we'll all be cheering and rooting for him to keep collecting all the, I think, awards that he can get, because he's doing some groundbreaking stuff. He's also behind Black and Scottish, and I think we can also proudly claim him to also be doing Black and Northern Irish. So I think without any further ado, Stuart, could you join us in this conversation? Hi, Stuart.
Hello, all. Thank you for having me.
Well,
That
hi.
was a really good introduction. I was like, is Laurie talking about me, or is this someone else? Is enough to be given access to Small Axe before it was launched on BBC. I was asked to come on a panel similar to this and watch the film, and I was blown away. I was overwhelmed. I watched Mangrove and I had to pause it several times. I was crying my heart out. It was, oh God, some of the Letitia Wright scenes. I was just in tears. It was so powerful. It was beautiful. It was really good to see Steve McQueen on television, as you were saying, Joanna. The fact that we usually have to go to cinema to watch his movies, but I'm truly inspired by Steve McQueen, and as a black director going over there to make Hunger, and then I'm coming over to make Black and Northern Irish, and then I'm coming over with Colin Salmon as well, who played as General Zod in Krypton over in Northern Ireland. So we're coming over to shoot. I just feel privileged to be given that opportunity and meet the Black people, but to be able to speak to you guys and discuss this film is important. As you know, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, etc. In my life over the last year, especially after Black Lives Matter has totally changed. There's so much is happening. So this is a very important piece you guys have put together. So thank you very much.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And I think we're excited about the prospect of all the things you will continue to do. And I hope in the future we will get Colin and put him in the hot seat like we do with you tonight,
Oh,
and
easily
ask
done.
a lot of interesting questions, because I think it's not only America who has amazing creative film producers and writers. We actually have them on this side of the pond. And I think it's time we kind of put you in the spotlight. So, Stuart, I apologize in advance that we will pick on you and your creative abilities, and we will try to get you triggered with all those emotions and memories
Oh,
that are synonymous to, I think, what we're going to talk about tonight. And I think tonight's one, for every person who I think resonates with having some Black heritage, Lovers Rock, especially in this particular, I think, clip of the small axes, there's anybody who has that in their family as far as genealogy, it will hit every nerve you've ever had, because everything about it will resonate. So it doesn't matter if you're very young when this was done, even as you're older today, you will remember the notorious sneaking out of houses to go to places you're not supposed to be at, trying to show up back in bed looking like you slept, knowing that you're going to have the morning call to go to church for Sunday. So I'm sure there were many of faces very embarrassed on Sunday morning, realizing that we were all in a party the night before. So I hope we will continue more of these conversations. So next in studio, our next guest, now he's the founder of Beyond Skin. And I think just equally by the definition of what he is the founder of, he's a lover of music. He's a musician himself. I've had the opportunity of hear him playing, and this is not recited, of course, just playing as a musician that he is. And I can comfortably say that, Darren, you can be a bit of a diva. So would you like to join us, Darren? Hi.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
I'm good, yes. Lovely to join you all. So thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Now, I know as far as Beyond Skin is concerned, you're the sort of person where skin doesn't have any meaning. We're all people. And I think your whole life is being attributed to music, and appreciating that, you know, as people, there's music that we have as talent, and there's music that we have as people. So I'm delighted that we can get to tap into this. And how did you enjoy the movie, just to say?
I mean, what a fabulous film! I've watched it two and a half times, shall we say? And as a music lover, it's one of those films where the music is integrated into the story. It's not a soundtrack that's been bolted on. I mean, there's been careful thought in that, and some amazing moments. And I've just been playing the soundtrack constantly on my Spotify for the last few days there, because it's amazing music. And I think even the first scene where the guys are moving the sound system in and putting it together, and when that needle hits the wax, like they had me. I mean, I was sold. I was bored of that film. So amazing bit of cinematography.
Well, I think we're going to have a revolution, ladies and gentlemen. And I think just the needle hitting that vinyl is the key. So we will look forward to what you bring to the table tonight. And last by no means least, I'm going to ask Esther to join us. Now, Esther has been, I suppose, new to the airwaves in Northern Ireland, but she is hitting them like, I think, a duck to water, I could say. She has been having very riveting conversations. She's with the Golden Thread Gallery, and I think equally in her own right, Esther, you have been provoking us with very challenging conversations in different panels. And I think you've been echoing the sentiment of how important it is, not only in art as in invisibility, but in the interaction of people. And I think just that keen eye and sense of creativity that you bring to the atmosphere. Thank you for being part of this conversation. And how are you feeling about the movie today?
I absolutely love the Small Axe series. I watched it when it came out. Originally, I watched it again, and then I watched it again because it's absolutely amazing. I think the snippets of life that it's showing, and just the underrated stories, basically, and just us being able to connect with these people. And I think it was mentioned earlier that these are stories that we probably know of, but just has never been able to grace the screen. And it's amazing that Steve McQueen has done it. And it's amazing that we're all experiencing it and talking about it. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me onto this panel to talk. And I hope we can have an amazing discussion tonight. Yeah.
Well, for everyone's benefit, I cheated, and you have a little bit of an intro so that explains who everybody is and kind of what they do. So before we have the conversation about the movie itself, I just want to find out at least from each one of you, because we want to get to know you a little bit more before we start tackling the interest with the movie. I'm going to ask you for one fun fact, and I'll probably start with you, Stuart. What is the one fun fact that nobody else in the world would know, but you'll let us know tonight? You're muted, Stuart.
Can you give me some kind of steer? I'm just trying to think how far back do we go? Is it?
Oh, well, you want to how far back? I mean, Stuart, as far back as you like, we'll take it.
One fun fact.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story my daughter said. It was quite cool.
Okay.
Right, so this is recently. This is very, very recently. So I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and you accumulate toys and clothes throughout the years, and it was her birthday recently, and so she got loads of toys for her birthday, and the place is getting full. Our home is getting filled with toys. Her bedroom. So we start to collate some of her old toys and say, look, we're going to give it to charity. And then she just went in a bad mood and just threw the toy down, and she's like, oh, every single time you keep giving it to charity. Why does charity always seem to get it? She gets everyone's toys. And I was like, what do you mean? So in her mind, charity is another little girl around her age that continues every single year gets toys. And I just can't stop thinking about it, because I thought that was very, very clever. So that is my funny little stories.
No, we like that. I really appreciate that. That's a fun fact. So everybody be on the lookout for this charity person. So
yeah, because she's taking everything.
Absolutely. What about you, Johanna? What's a fun fact about you?
I was just going to do something boring, that I've got odd eyes. So I have a green eye and a brown eye. That's kind of fun. But the more I've been thinking about tonight, my other fun fact is that I used to work in an art gallery, and I used to run illegal raves.
Ooh.
So we used to, back whenever, you can get that much money, and, we had a beautiful, we had a space that was quite high up, and I'm not going to name the place, but most people will know if they're from Northern Ireland or Belfast. And between the exhibitions, then you would clear it out in between, and then you'd have one big party, and then that would pay for the next exhibition. Everyone would pay in, and everyone would bring their own, but that kind of community as well, that kind of community that we had through the gallery, and being able to get even some kind of well-known DJs to come and stuff too. So yeah, there you go.
Wow, so we've got interesting ones. A girl named Charity, and now an underground party enthusiast. So we're not doing too badly. What about you, Esther? What's a fun fact for you?
So mine does pale in comparison to the past two, but in sixth form, I was in a Spanish play. So it was fully in Spanish, and I played a crazy old lady in Casa de Bernarda Alba. And from my Spanish there, you could tell that I was quite bad at it. So yeah, it was an experience and a half. So
okay, so I hope we can summon that bad character at some point if there's anything that resonates in our discussion tonight. So we'll hold you to that one. And last but not least, Darren, any fun facts for us?
Yeah, I got a funny story, and nobody's going to listen to me after this, but I'll tell it anyway, because I was at an event and I went to the bathroom, and it was a classic tap that just comes out at tremendous force and covers you with water. So all down the front of my trousers was wet, and I knew I had to go in again to this boardroom. So, and this is creative thinking, folks. So I turned my pants round backwards and put them on back to front, and pulled my jumper down, and went into the meeting with my trousers on back to front so people can see the wet part, and I got away with it.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. When in doubt, be creative and go in back to front. Well, I guess it puts a new spin on. I think back in the day there was a called crisscross. And
That's right, yes.
Wear things back to front. So you're not doing too badly then.
I was in fashion.
Absolutely. So now that we've had a fun fact from each one of you, I think that the part that is the most interesting for us is the conversation about this movie, this film rather. You know, what are the initial sort of feelings? Because I mean, I know for me, there's a lot that resonated with it, very emotional in certain parts, because it just strikes certain elements in your, I think, your memories and even things that resonate even to this day. I mean, what was the most striking fact? I'll come back and start with you, Darren.
But just general about the film, I think what Steve McQueen's actually managed to do, because I mean, from myself as well, especially being a white man, I knew those kind of things, those kind of blues parties went on. But what he's managed to do is take, if you look at, it's a slice of history. It's as if he's had a cake of history, and he's carefully carved out a piece and just removed it, and you can see all the layers. It's that, and I think he did it so well. I mean, there's some powerful moments in it. I mean, when they're like silly games, when they're just singing that together, and what a great song. There's just a moment of togetherness there that is just really unique. And then we were talking about briefly earlier on about the Revolutionaries track. As soon as you hear that, dee, 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 and you think, for those who know the song and know what it represents, when I heard that, I said, "Oh my God, they're actually going to go here," and they did, and that's a scene you need to watch a couple of times, even though they play the song twice in the scene, because that was just one of the most powerful moments I've seen in a film, where you just see all the emotion and all the kind of oppression just released. It was like, as I described before, like a jack in the box that, all this was pushed down, and that song was the melody for opening up that lid, and it was a very powerful scene. It really moved me actually, and I just felt that was the film for me. That scene just was just one that moment. So I think there's a lot in there, as you know, and the music does play a big part of it. But to capture that took real skill, and I think he did it. I think Stephen King did really well. I mean, that was first class.
Oh yeah, he absolutely did. And I think I'll come across to you, Stuart, because you're in the business of capturing people in these moments. And I mean, I think even from a creative perspective, where you write, even if it's the script for someone to play this out, how were you feeling when you were looking at this? And what are your sort of initial thoughts? I know you said it got you emotional in some parts, but how do you feel about it
I
now?
think, well, from listening to Steve McQueen at that time, black people, it wasn't a case of we could just we can go to bars and clubs. We weren't allowed in such vicinities, so black people had to come together and create their own entertainment. That alone, fundamentally, that's the fundamental of it all. The fact that they didn't have that equality, and the fact that these individuals felt that they wanted to create their own space, um, and obviously, from, from a film perspective as well, it's to hold a frame for so long, like when they're all singing for, I think that it went on for about 12 minutes. To be able to do that instills confidence. If you know Steve McQueen's work, you'll know that that's what he's famous for. In 12 Years a Slave, the whipping scene, he said he did not want. He said, look, if at the time you wouldn't have the opportunity to look away, so why look away when you're watching it? He wanted to keep it there. As well in Mangrove as well, he did the same thing when the main character was in a cell. And with this, no one else would even dare keep the camera on such a scene for so long. And also, another thing Steve McQueen had done is he'd used a new cinematographer. The cinematographer that he usually uses for his movies was on another set, so he brought in a new young black cinematographer who he'd only watched a little bit of his content. Um, and what happened was, in that scene, the 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 dancing scene, sorry, the when they're all in the room partying, what he wanted was, because the cinematographer was black, that he had a lot more access than some other people, because the cinematographer was right in there with the camera within the crowd. And Steve McQueen said he felt that was right, because the actors felt natural continue to be themselves, continue to stay in character, because the cameraman that was there is black as well. And for me, that from a film perspective, that was very, very powerful. There's so many levels to this film, but that's the part that made me realize about representation and inclusion behind the camera as well, because if it was someone from a different background, I don't think we would have got the same performance. So this is an example of why representation is key, but it's also merit to Steve McQueen for the fact that he went out there, seen this guy's work. It was literally one short film, and then brought him on as his main cinematographer. Now this guy is now known around the world. So from a film perspective, it taught me a lot, and it was powerful to be able to hold a 12-minute scene with just people singing, and then replaying it again, and then replaying it again, and then you're like, my goodness, this is beautiful. But only Steve McQueen can do that.
Well, I mean, I think the fact that we're talking about it now, and I think let's dig into that a little bit. And I think one of the key things you said, Stuart, is having permission to be yourselves as a group of people on your terms, because you see the transformation of the house. So obviously there was a lot of prep into this. You can see the peeling off of the wires to get the speakers and the whole setup. So there isn't the opportunity to go and have a venue somewhere else. You're kind of thinking safety. You're kind of thinking familiarity in order to pull off a night where you feel that you're not under any threat of any sort. And you kind of see this play out quite a bit throughout a lot of the scenes. So I think when you were listening, and I think Darren, especially for you, when you were saying the tempo changed as the music was playing, when we had the introduction of the gentleman who comes in, who was the cousin to, I think it's the lady, one of the lead characters, Martha. So it's her cousin in the characters here, when he comes in, and he really shouldn't be there, because the first time we see him, he's in a telephone booth robbing it. That's how we know that there is something very, suspicious about his character, because he's actually robbing the telephone booth to have enough money to make it as the entry amount at the door. And I think ironically as well, the whole idea of a bouncer, this is a house party, and there's the big guy who is the bouncer who's at the door. So somebody needs to maintain order. So that is really crucial. But Darren, as you were hearing the music, and you can kind of tell that the music was churning the tempo to create something. So there's a lot of testosterone in the room. There's been a lot of jilted love situations going on, and somebody feeling like somebody's taking the girl somebody should have. How did you find, and what were you thinking as the anticipation as you listened to the music, Darren?
I mean, the music did take you up and down. I mean, the scene where the kung fu fighting, that's there's some really wonderful moments of humor in there as well. So he did take on that emotional roller coaster of pull you between humor and then songs where the Silly Games song and the Revolutionaries, where it's, I mean, there was a happening there. There was a moment, something happened there, which again they managed to capture. So for me, yeah, the soundtrack, and even when Martha was going down the street, and then the four youths started taunting her and falling after her as well. The music playing there, and I actually wrote this down because the song playing was Leroy Smart's song. Throw away your knife, let us all unite. Everybody is living in fear through this ballistic affair, and so that was playing in the background while she was. You could just see the fear turning in her face as those youths started to approach her, and then obviously they backed off when this huge doorman was there and kind of came to her defense. So it did. The music was just through it all. This narrative under another layer under the story, and I think that's what really played on your emotions and put you in, because music does that in a very powerful way, especially in film. So he used it very well, and definitely some of the tracks were very edgy tracks to use, and tracks which, for me, knowing the kind of myth about those blues parties, playing Blondie and then some of the other songs, and all, I went, oh wow, oh my goodness. So for me, it was an education, because again, I had a stereotype of if it's a blues party with the black community, you know, this is the music they're going to be listening to. So there was some curveballs in there for myself, which I went, oh my god, there you go. So I think that was an educational thing regarding the music culture there as well, and what people were into and what they were listening to.
Well, I think to kind of spin it a little bit, because we've got the music scene, we've got the atmosphere, and we've got this. This is like one scenario going on. And then there's another scenario, and I'll probably put this to the ladies now for the initial part where Martha and Patty, two best friends, who've kind of decided, you know, Patty has to wait for Martha because she has to sneak out of the house, of course, and they're off to this party. So they arrive then to the party, and even on first entry, when the guys come up, there's a lot of conversation that is initially very intimidating to Patty. You know, like they were making reference to her, like her being a beef patty, like she's slightly bigger than all the other girls. How did you feel as women initially when you're kind of hearing that? Because there's so much focus on what you look like. You know, there's a big emphasis on presentation. I'll start with you, Esther. How did you feel when all of this kind of directed to Patty was going on? How did that make you feel as a woman?
As a woman, I mean, I'm not surprised or shocked because that's how it goes on. And it's horrible to feel like you're the ugly friend, but that's how Patty obviously felt. And it's expected in a way, especially in a community, not community, sorry, in an environment such as that. So it's a very male dominated environment. You could see with how Steve McQueen was kind of angling the shots with the men kind of surrounding the girls in the middle, and how they're kind of layered at and like viewed as meat and as sexual objects basically. So it's nothing surprising at all. But as a woman, you just kind of feel like, oh no. But then I kind of know what goes on in those parties. I know what goes on in like clubs and nights out. And you're just like, this is life. And this is how we're meant to kind of handle things. Just go on with it. But it really shouldn't be like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll come to you, Joanna. I mean, there's the scene as well. We're upstairs, you know, you're at a house party. And obviously there's only this one bathroom that we all have to share. Now she's gotten the attention of an unwanted suitor, okay? And he's not getting it that, you know what, you might be fly to all the other girls, but you know, I'm not interested. What is it like when you have unsolicited attention and she literally has to push him out because she needs to use the bathroom? I mean, how did you feel about that and watching that as a woman as well, Joanne?
Well, it evoked so much emotion in me. It was like, I've been her. That's happened to me. And the guy who plays him is fantastic. He just has this real air about him, the way, you know, he's kind of smooth in his look and he's looking a certain way. And it's that kind of, it's so deceiving. And where she's able to kind of catch him quite early on, you know, she's able to read him, which unfortunately someone else doesn't do later on. And yeah, there's been so many times, unfortunately, as a woman, where you've been in this position. And in a way, this shows that it happens in every culture, in every society, unfortunately. And that's kind of one thing that I kind of written down here was, you know, how women are treated at this time, and even up until now, how once, I think as well, like once you're in a kind of more comfortable setting, that's when people can take more advantage of you almost. Do you know, it's like once people's guards are down, or you know, because everything that's happening in the other room where everyone's dancing is beautiful and everyone's up close to each other and there's so much love in the room, and there's a predator, do you know, and even then for the rest of the show, I'm looking for him, I'm waiting for him, you know, I almost feel like I'm on my guard. Like that's how well it was played, that it actually made me feel quite uncomfortable, and it was quite difficult. But that's when you know that someone is showing something that's difficult. And that's what Steve McQueen does. Like, you know, in Hunger, he's showing you, you know, like, and like what Stuart was saying earlier on, you know, scenes in 12 Years a Slave, it's like he will show you every side of it, whether it's like really sexual or offensive or whatever it is, you know, he covers all of those things. So that is how I felt. And I actually thought with Patty, it was a play on her name more than maybe her appearance. Like I kind of hope it wasn't, you know, that kind of feeling like you're not as pretty as your friend. I think she just has a bad name.
Well, I mean, I think that's the whole idea, you know. And I think when you've got someone like Stephen, it's the subtleties in life, because I think for a lot of people of different ethnicities, if I could probably say this, and I'll probably go to Stuart and Esther to kind of echo the sentiment of some of these feelings. It's the subtleties, and a lot of societies say things without fully understanding the implication of what it means. And, if I said something to Esther, for me, understanding as a Black woman to another Black woman, the interpretation and understanding of that, it would fall in a certain area. And there would be, we could probably get along or fall out, but it depends on what it is. Whereas a lot of times, and I think this is what, at least I can see what Stephen is trying to do, is in a world where everybody looks at London a particular kind of way, there's an underlying current that there are people who exist who are not the stereotypical white community that everybody wants to see, who are equally part and parcel of contributing to the same world and economy and life. But they're not captured and recorded and seen as often. So you have this, I think, glimpse into that space. And I think even for me to kind of come to Esther and Stuart, how often in your everyday life, we forget about your qualifications, we forget about your eloquence, we forget about who you are when you present. Are you kind of disregarded, maybe not seen for your true potential, or just marginalized? I mean, Stuart, how often does that happen?
Oh my God, that is ridiculous amounts of stories I could give you. I'll give you just a couple. So, I was born in Kenya. We moved to London at the age of 5, and we've been here. We then moved to Scotland, and we've been here ever since. Now, there's not many Black Scots, hence the reason why I made Black and Scottish, and it really resonated with people because it was a group of talented individuals they'd never seen before, and it was centered around my daughter. Now, um, around the mid '90s, early 2000s, I've got a Scottish accent. I've considered myself Scottish, consider myself British, whatever you want to call it. And then the asylum seekers was brought over, into a very bad area in the East End of Glasgow, and the racism they received was unbelievable. You can just imagine the kind of racism they received. Now, prior to them coming, I was the one of the only Black people, and you know yourself. You have to do and say things. You can't truly be yourself. You have to adapt with people. You have to kind of preempt what they potentially are going to say and do. You have to, you know, from when I went on holiday, I went to high school in Kenya as well, and I remember arriving in Kenya and just feeling like I could just relax. I just felt like I don't need to worry about anything. No one's going to say anything to me. There's no cut of race. But the point I'm trying to make is when the asylum seekers then came over, Black people, I was doesn't matter if I was at university, it doesn't matter how well I was doing, how successful I was. As soon as they came, I was just, you're an asylum seeker. So then the racism changed, Black this, Black that prior to that. And then as soon as the asylum seekers came, it was asylum seeker, get back to where you came from, and it's like all that hard work of trying to fit in was gone because of, and, I don't really like saying this, but I remember there was this point that was like, I was like, no, I don't want asylum seekers to be here for selfish reasons. And that reason was so that people would leave me alone. But it's funny because my last documentary, um, that's on BBC iPlayer just now, is about asylum seeker that moved to Glasgow. This guy's the 3 million followers, 3 billion video views. He suffers from PTSD, and guess how do you think that PTSD came about? The PTSD came about because in primary school he received racism. So it was like full circle. I'm lucky I live in a middle class suburb, but then I had to make that documentary. I had to go to the areas where they sent all of the asylum seekers, and I never experienced any racism for a few years. And then as soon as I went to shoot this documentary, day one, racism in the lift. Day two, chased, you know, in this area where this guy lives. So in a sense of being marginalized and being belittled, unfortunately, and I'm sure you can agree with me and Esther as well, that doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how much you try to fit in, there will always be a group of people that will make you feel like you don't belong. And one of the last people that was on the Black and Scottish, Sir Jeff Palmer, his last line was, we should never be made to feel like we don't belong," and that resonated with everyone. So that's just one of many stories.
Completely. And I think I can understand that. And every single person who's out there resonates that, because I think it takes to hear one from the other. I completely feel everything you're saying, and I don't even need to be in Scotland, and I don't even need to be a refugee asylum seeker. I get it, because there's such a discrepancy in how we think, and a lot of it is how we're educated and the language that we use to associate others and how we see them and interpret them, and then with the fear of not wanting to be rejected and still want to hold our place. I kind of have earned my place and I've earned my stripes, and now by technicality I'm reduced to like I'm yesterday's news and I'm yesterday's everything. So I completely hear that. And Esther, what do you find? I mean, equally, I know Stuart has echoed his sentiments. What do you find for yourself? Even today, I mean, we expect the world has changed. We expect people are more mindful. We expect people are a lot more conscientious of their language. What happens?
Yeah, so I think there's this, well, for me personally, I find that there's this idea that, oh, you're different, that, I can, for example, I've had friends before being like, oh, you're not like the rest of them meaning the rest of the, like, Black community, like you're different from them. So I went to predominantly white school. So people are like, no, you're not like the rest of the Black people that you see in London, or like, the ghetto, as you call it. And I hate that, the mentality that, oh, the only reason I'm here is because I'm different from the rest, or because I don't have Black traits that they equate to being Black. Or I've had people come to me being like, you're not Black enough, simply. And that, I think that's the worst. And this is, and I'll say again, is white people coming to me that I don't fit their perception of a Black person. And it's completely different, or like similar in the same way as Stuart, because there's like a perception of Black people of being thuggish and loud and like abrasive. And if we don't fit it, we automatically we deserve a seat at the table, I guess. Or like we deserve to be again, this word gets thrown around all the time, like token, or we deserve to be that person that has to hold the rest of our race to account. And it shouldn't be like that, and that's how I find it. And sometimes it's within, just like harping back on what you said earlier about how we perceive things differently. It's sometimes in the slightest like wording, or like the slightest way that things are phrased. It's not outrightly being like, oh, you're different, but it's kind of saying that, oh, why would you do that? Because every time someone says something to me, I have to think about it in like two meanings, being like, do they actually mean that at face value? Or is there like a hidden agenda behind it? Or is there like a preconceived notion about me that they're trying to display through what they said, basically?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you both of you were right, because these experiences fundamentally shape the world we live in. And I think by technicality, who suggests who is at the top end of what pecking order? Who decides who, for whatever reason, seems to be better, and who decides what the definition of Black enough is? What if I'm not even satisfied that I'm not Black enough? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever wondered that, I could go somewhere, and by virtue of the school I've been to, the life I've had, and the choices my parents have made, I'm a benefactor of their pain inadvertently. And a lot of times it's not pronounced, because what you see is a fast forwarded version of what our parents might have invested to give us alternatives. So we're living in the alternatives that they have, I think, wished for us. And then to find that we could be rewound back in time to the very pain that they were trying to spare us from, it's an unfair technicality. And having said that, I will go back to the movie, and I will kind of come to Johanna and Darren a little bit about this, because there's two scenes. The first one, I mean, Darren, I think you alluded to, when Patty left the party because she was upset. Martha realizes Patty is left, and she tries to go after her. And there's a group of guys, I think a group of white guys sitting outside doing whatever in their little spot. And Martha's walking to this, and she's kind of thinking, okay, so far so good. nothing's happened. Called Patty a couple of times, no response, and there was more than one. So automatically to her, this is threatening. And then obviously saved by the day by obviously our big bouncer fella who comes in, extracts her from that situation. Second situation now is when we're looking at the mechanic shop, where we've got Cooper, who is the love interest for Martha, who is there, Franklin Cooper, who's there, and they're at his workplace. And this is supposed to be, every guy has his moment. You want to take your girl somewhere private, excluded, and you want to show off that you got skills or whatever. And I think this is what he was trying to show, that, I might ride a bike, but I've got talent. And in the midst of him having his moment, his boss arrives, and it becomes quite an embarrassing situation. So he pulls him to the side, kind of checks him, and then the whole situation is diffused. Now, from the point of view that we're talking in the race context here, how do you feel, being that you're white and you're looking at this, how does that feel when you have to watch what it felt like and continues to feel like for a lot of Black people even now? What does that feel like? I'll probably start with you, Darren.
I mean, I do find this very difficult because, I'm obviously white as well. And for me, racism makes no sense whatsoever. In my world, that makes no sense. But I'm still aware of, I do have some prejudices, and I do see people, and if they're a different colour in the street, I mean, I notice them more than other people. So I'm aware of the way I see the world anyway, and to deny that would be a total lie of to recognise people. But I don't judge people for the colour, but I recognise that colour. And those scenes, I think, for the one with the guys when who were starting to approach and threaten the girl, I mean, first of all, it's okay. Let's not do this, because it's a men thing as well, nothing to do with colour. It's the fact that it's guys intimidating a girl. It's that, and that's one thing that really bugs me about society, because men now are seen as suspicious beings. That's the way men are perceived in general now, and so those things amplify that, which does really grate me, and I just really hate that nonsense of men intimidating women in that way, especially when there's more of them. And then you get to see the fear when the monkey chants were coming out and what they were doing. You get to see the fear in her eyes, and for me, it's just to step outside a door, not even get 100 yards and have that. I mean, it's hard to watch, but I don't understand what that's like, because I don't experience that every day. I've had my fair share of being not invited to something, or left out, or judged because I'm Northern Irish, but that's been momentarily or the odd day. So to have that every day, it's very hard for me to understand how that is, and how that affects people and how they operate in life. And I'll never understand that, because I'm the white majority, and it's trying to get my head around that. So it's trying to. I think these films are stories. These are human stories, and these stories need to be told. And I think that's the best we can do through the arts as well, and create, from film and music, is to try and have that understanding of what that's like. And that film, for me, gave me another insight into what it's like that I didn't have before. So I suppose for me personally, I need more of that. I need more of those types of films to try and something that moves me in my soul, rather than just hearing the story or just seeing it in a snapshot or experiencing it one-off in a lifetime for myself. So I think what Stuart's doing, and I think that's the medium we need. We need to get this stuff out there to the mainstream. We need to tell these stories. We need to move people and have that human empathy. And film can do that. Film can get into people's houses and do that.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly add to that? Sorry.
Sure. Go ahead.
Sorry, Dan. Do you know what? I've spoken to so many people about these kind of issues, and that's probably the best. The way you've articulated that is absolutely perfect, and this has been recorded. It's perfect because you said you admitted in saying, look, I don't understand what that is like, but I need more of this kind of content for me to understand that. For me as a filmmaker, that is very positive, because sometimes you think to yourself, do I want to continue making Black content? Is it, oh God, I want to tell other stories? But with someone like Steve McQueen, who else is going to tell them? You know, people like myself and other black directors. We need to continue to tell these stories so that people like Darren can continue to, um, you know, say that he needs this content for him to have a better understanding, because obviously you will never have a full understanding. But I just wanted to add that in there, that was probably the best. I'm gonna quote you in the future, Dan. Don't charge me though.
It's all right.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, you know, one of the reasons why Darren is in the conversation tonight, and equally with Johanna, is because they get it. They get it beyond the fundamental of just seeing us as people. Because in practice and in theory and in the language and in their attitude, and I know I can give both of you a hard time when it comes to some of these difficult questions, because we have these very, very difficult questions. And the thing for me is, you know, for you, you can blush and I can catch you. And when you get uncomfortable, it's very obvious to me. But if I blushed or I did anything, it would take you a while to notice. So the one thing I do appreciate is that both of you have always kept a candor and a responsibility to owning what is a very difficult and complex conversation that most people are too uncomfortable to have because they don't know how to approach it, and they're uncomfortable with what it could mean and the acceptance of what you've just acknowledged. So thank you for being able to be open about that. And this is who he really is. You know, I would love to say, you know, he's putting on a performance and it looks good for the camera. But this is Darren at heart. I could give you enough account of moments where Darren has asked, for example, for drummers. And the assumption here is Darren is going to send some Black African drummers. And it only has to be Darren who knows how to find white African drummers, you know. So that's just the irony of Darren. I can guarantee you that one. So thank you for being that person, Darren. And Johanna, you know, for you as well, equally. You've heard what Darren said, and I mean, in your own words, I don't want to steal how you feel, but how do you respond after hearing and seeing this as well?
I completely know what he means, and he's saying, oh, that feels different to me. And as a woman, that's normal to me. That's completely normal. Walking down the street by myself multiple times to be fearful of men and to be fearful of a gang of people, or even a gang of women, or a mixture of men and women. But it's just that thing of, once you're a woman, you are, people of that nature see you as this vulnerable creature that they can do whatever they want with. And the fact is, until kind of Me Too and all of this kind of exploded, it was just normal that I'd come home and say to my sisters, oh, I got flashed last night. Oh, a guy tried to attack me, but I ran away. Oh, a guy felt me up. It's normal. I don't need to write the hash Me Too. I don't need to write that down on Facebook. It's actually shocking. And I didn't share it. I didn't share those stories because I almost was like that. These are all true things that have happened to me, you know, and more, you know, and that's me and one person. And so I think that goes back to, you know, what Stuart was saying, was Steve McQueen doesn't let these little moments go. And these are these moments of wisdom. And like Darren was saying, the things that you learn from. So he does show you that awkward moment, the moment where, and just the fact, the word that they used and they made the monkey noises, it just boiled my blood, because it was down to the most simple, literal primate response to a person, to a human being. And you're so embarrassed when you're watching it, because you're embarrassed by these humans doing this to another human being. And that's what annoyed me, that made my blood boil. And you feel awkward and you want to look away and you don't want to watch it. But yet, like I've said, I've had those experiences, and even like to go to the very extreme with, because I always love movies, I go back to Steve McQueen's work, is that if you watch Shame, I'm watching this personal thing of a sex addict and what they're doing all day. Like, it's just fantastic work. And I think, you know, you have to just say that there's so many layers to this film. And actually, I didn't necessarily feel uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable because of what was used in that moment, but it felt like a normal thing to me.
Well, I think the thing is, we're taking Steve McQueen's ideas, views, feelings, and I think a lot of sentiments that a lot of people have and continue to have to this very day. And I think one of the things is where we looked at music and the impact of music and how music plays one of the biggest fundamentals in the backdrop of what's going on. Stewart even highlighted the fact that when you watch 12 Years a Slave, the whole whipping scene. And I think if we scale it back, even back in time, when you watch Roots and you have that very pivotal point where he's been told you're not allowed to be called Kunta Kinte, you're supposed to be called Toby. There's something very fundamental that I think people forget, that in present day today, you cannot erase who I am by giving me a brand new name or asking me to act differently. It's an imposition on anybody's human rights to suggest, to impose a personality or an accepted behavior to make them feel like they're accepted and they belong. And I think for every person who is of a different ethnicity, who isn't white, who happens to live not only in Northern Ireland, but in Europe, and I dare say anywhere in the world, no one has any right to put race or gender as a means of victimizing anybody. I think it's a very unfair paradox to try and, I think it's really a way of extracting power from someone. Because how scary is it for you to see a person walking in their own power that you need to diminish them for that? You know, there are a lot of people, even when we look at the movie, we've got the girl Cynthia, it's her birthday, the predator guy who's been through Martha, who's been kicked out, he's now on a vengeance streak. And this is kind of where we come to how men sometimes, you know, when a woman's scorned is one thing. When a man's scorned, it's an ugly thing. And we kind of see this whole episode. And then this young girl is now at the mercy of this guy in the garden. And then it takes the very girl that she didn't like in the beginning. Because we see this scene where Cynthia does not like the idea of Martha because she's prettier, she's cuter, she's got the whole room abuzz with her, but this is the woman that comes to her defense. So there's something that needs to be said in there that sometimes, you know what, it's got nothing to do with race either, but from a woman to woman level, there needs to be defense. If it's wrong, if it's not right, if it's inappropriate, something needs to happen in that space. And I'll probably come to you, Esther, and say, how did you feel when you watched Martha step in, defend a girl she didn't need to, and own that moment? Because that was a very revolutionary Me Too moment, women standing up, speaking their truth. How did that feel?
It felt like great to watch. And when I watched it the first time, when I watched it the first time, I didn't actually notice or clock the fact that Martha's cousin pointed out domestic violence within her family. And when I watched it again, I realized that maybe that's why she stood up, because when I watched it, I was like, why did she stand up? Because in that situation, I'm like, I'm not sure many girls would, because they'll think about their own safety, because it's this man and no one else was there. Martha had this amount of bravery that I was just like, amazing. It's great to watch. So when I watched it again, I was like, it must be because, again, she might be used to seeing this level of violence at her home. She might be just generally a better person or braver person than I am. Because at that moment in time, I was like, I'm vulnerable as well. Not vulnerable as well, but I am weak as well. What can I do in the situation? Because it could turn south for both of us completely. And it almost did actually for Martha, if it wasn't for Franklin that came in. And again, it shows how amazing Martha is, because she told Cynthia to go in and she was left alone out there. Again, things that I look up, like I'm looking up to this character being like, I don't know if I could ever do it at all. And Steven McQueen, again, amazing. I said this so much, but amazing in how he uses the music to kind of show her thought and how just selfless she is as a person. And this goes back to when her cousin was fighting with the bouncer, and Martha just stood right in there, again, in the violence, in the fight of it all. Like she's there to play with the boys, I guess. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess it goes to say there's nothing quite as tough as a strong Black woman. And I think she is the view of that. And anybody who happens to have Black in their family, don't mess with the women. There's a reason for that, because once they own their power and they know and they've learned the art of articulating who they are, it's not to say we don't cry now. It's not to say we don't feel pain. We feel everything else, but we've learned sometimes, like you said, Martha was in in a domestic abusive situation that she saw her mother live through. So by virtue of that, she had to take on a persona in order to absorb that and live it out in her everyday life. So defense becomes natural for her. I mean, Johanna, how do you feel about that whole solidarity moment? You know, two women, one who's at the mercy of a man here, and then stepping in another woman, and they kind of rescue the moment. And she, you know, orders restored to a degree. How does that feel for you as a woman too?
Again, I don't want to say like a broken record. It seems like something that, you know, a lot of girls have been through. But yes, it's the fact that she goes that extra mile, like Esther was saying, was like, doesn't run for help, stands up. Even this is the fact, doesn't she get a knife, isn't it, or like, yeah, something sharp, and
broken glass.
Yeah, broken glass, and the fact that she was just more concerned about getting the other girl away, who, you know, she doesn't know, and she's only briefly seen at the party. So I think it's really strong. And one thing I kind of like, I'm kind of bouncing off whenever you're saying about you know, being a Black woman. I always admire Black women. I always admire how strong they are and how resilient that they have to be. And sometimes it is a privilege to be white, and I don't necessarily need to be out kind of, or grown up kind of fighting as much as, you know, like people from different diverse backgrounds have been, to try and prove something to other people. But throughout this whole film, you know, there's just this other layer that I see because I'm white. Then I just remember like a joke, you know, that my friend had said, is that whenever she moved to Africa and she was in Ghana and she started dating a guy, and she's, first of all, she was like, found it weird that, you know, that the men hold hands over there, and everyone's very, you know, there's a lot more touching, and there's a lot more, things are spoken out loud. And if you go to a club like that, people dance like this, you know, right up against each other, you know, there's no boundaries. So I feel like there was that fire in her at that moment. There was that fire of her background, who she was. And I definitely think, like Esther was saying, it was spurred on to her experiences. But that's something that I found throughout the whole film, where of course I relate to these women as a woman, but I also respect and see how, you know, the word, how they've had to be, I'm dyslexic, so I'm terrible with words, you know, they have to rebel and they have to push themselves more than other people have to.
And I think both of you have echoed, and equally all of you have echoed, some very, very challenging, not only at an emotional level, but even we hope for the audience who have been listening in to our conversation. We could talk about a lot of things, and I would invite everyone, if they've found anyone who resonates with them in this panel, and I would probably say, could you be flexible if you get more likes and followers and people curious to talk to you after this? Because I think there's a lot that can be learned and exchanged from this conversation. So to wrap this up, if there was anything as a message that you would want to put out to the world, I would probably start with you, Esther. What's your one-liner to close tonight?
I think I just have to go for the cliche, be kind kind of sentiment, that you, not that you don't know what people are going through, but you don't, but also you have to walk a mile in everyone's shoes before you really understand. Just be kind. It doesn't matter, we're all the same, really and truly. We're all in this world to find something. We don't really know what, so why not be kind while you're here?
Thank you. We'll take that, and I'll come to you, Darren. What do you say?
I suppose it's challenge the narrative and the language we use. So, I mean, even I love that the Black and Scottish is such a powerful statement. But I think what's equally as powerful, and I guess people think about identity and who we are, is, you know, filmmakers in Scottish should be another company you set up, because that immediately just puts you that you're a filmmaker and you're this and you're this and you're this, and it kind of it mainstreams what it should be. That, you know, and I think we just got to look at the language we use as well, to try and make sure that people really just see things, and people see as humans in all our different layers and all our different, whether we're mothers or fathers or brothers and sisters or filmmakers or sports people or athletes, whatever it is, to see that before they see all the other stuff.
And I'll come to you, Johanna. What's your lasting sentence for tonight?
Just kind of bouncing what Darren said there about you know, whenever we talked about filmmakers, and I was like, I want to do something with filmmakers, it's global film screenings that I do for the Strand. And I was like, okay, so what, you know, Black filmmakers is there in Britain? Do you know, it's so hard, and I've been in recent discussions and panels and things like that. There's such a small percentage, and it's like under 5%, and it's just the fact that, like, at least Steve McQueen is out there doing it, and he's a good person for us to open to first of all, and then we want these sessions to be then going to other people who are not well known, or people like Stuart who are making documentaries because they need to be made, and we need to then look at, and that's why we need to be kind of getting that kind of global, it needs to be a global importance. And I've seen a real shift in going to, you know, as working in the film industry, like going to these film industry events, and I just recently realized that everyone in the panels, there was hardly anyone who was white, but it was really over the top, like there was hardly anyone at all for the whole conference, and I was just like, well, that's making a difference, and I hope it just doesn't go away. That's my only thing. I'm like, are they doing this year because of everything that's been happening with the BLM and all this, and is it then next year it'll just be back to everyone who's white again? So it's the longevity of that. And so instead of words that I have to say, I will, and as a visual artist, a picture in my mind is the scene where it's just close-ups of everyone taking each other's hands. Do you see that? Like on the dance floor, it's just like everyone just touching and just holding on to each other, and just this like moment of touch. And that's something that I just think really resonated with me, you know, out of the shots. That was just really beautiful.
And Stuart, what's your final piece for us tonight?
Final piece. Well, to be a director, you need to be impartial. You know, you need to be able to listen to everyone's stories. Everyone is a storyteller, whether you like it or not. We've probably told about 20 stories today. When someone asks you how's your day been and what did you do last night, what did you watch last night, you're telling a story. Now you need to be impartial so that you can glean the information that you're looking for to help spread. So what my point I'm trying to make is it's all about listening. Before we shout action or cut, or you know, we're in the post production, the first thing we're doing is listening to people's stories. Then it's up to us as directors to help shape that story. So the main thing I would say is you just need to listen to people, and hopefully that will instill some empathy. So for example, listening to us tonight, talking about stories of racism, you'll have a better idea. You'll have a better idea of what it is that an individual is going through, just from what Darren was saying earlier. It's simple as that. You know, we paint pictures, and we, you know, we add things, and we say yes, but they did this and they did that. The people you're listening to might have done some heinous crimes, but from the day they were born to roughly about the age of 8 to 9 years old, they were influenced by other people, and they were innocent at that time. So the person that when I'm listening to someone, I'm trying to go back to speak to that 8-year-old and 9-year-old, and then from there it will help me shape my story. So listening is very, very important, and I hopefully that's something that we continue to do going forward.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here tonight. Now, whether it's from Esther, which is exercise kindness, whether it's from Darren, be careful of the language you use and the implications of it, whether it's from Johanna, reach out and touch somebody, and you never know, they might touch you back, but for all the right reasons, of course. And as Stuart so rightfully put it, listen, be impartial, be open to the experience. And you know what? When it comes to voting and putting other faces in places they don't belong, we have that responsibility now. We can own the narrative. Let's change up the films. Let's change up the narrative. And Black Lives Matter is not just for a day, it's for a lifetime. So from Lori Gatsi-Barnett and my guest tonight, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Good night from us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Lori.